The podcast is the thing that feeds everything else that you do from a marketing perspective. So it all starts with that regular cadenced podcast episode that solves a real problem from your target prospect. You want the problem that your podcast solves for its listenership, for the people who watch it, to be the same as whatever your business is that you're selling them. But studies have shown that people who listen to podcasts trust the ever-living crap out of the hosts of those podcasts. It is crazy. Those hosts tell you to buy something and you buy it. This is why the biggest creators in the world, like Alex Hormozi and Layla Hormozi and Amy Porterfield and Jenna Kutcher and Russell Brunson and Tony Robbins and Simon Sinek and Financial Feminists and Gary Vee, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these people have podcasts. All of them do. And that is because it is such a potent lead nurturing thing. Nothing builds trust like this because people just spend so much time with you and you can go so deep.
I know you said that both can be successful, whether it's audio or audio and video. Do you see studies that one is better than the other, or?
My advice is if you can do video and you're interested in it, like you're like, oh, I think that would be fun, do it. Because the YouTube algorithm is so powerful. YouTube has monetization baked in. So if you're gonna learn this new medium, you might as well skip right to doing video. Make your feed available on the audio platforms, but I would be more concerned week after week with, did this video get views? Did this video get views? And if you make that happen, get more and more views, your audio show will actually also grow.
Do you put together like an outline for when you're like putting together a show, or like you said once per week, do you have like a month worth of like, here's topic ideas that rotate and kind of tie in together, or is everything just random?
That there's like 3 or 4 content pillars, like 3 or 4 buckets that your content kind of fits into. So for me personally, I have 4. Bucket number 1 is, now that said, on a week-to-week basis when it comes to content topics, my favorite way to do it, and the way that, like, in my opinion, generates the most sales and like does the best job of nurturing, is using what I call the PQRS method. And so what that looks like is, at the end of each week, you review your calendar. Everything, not just business meetings, it's interactions with clients, it's stuff you did with your family, like whatever it was. And for each item on the calendar, you ask PQRS, what problems did I solve? What questions did I answer? What realizations did I have? And what stories did I encounter?
So for everybody that's here, this is Kevin with Grow the Show. He specifically focuses on helping folks with launching and their podcast, right? And taking a lot of the day-to-day off of them. So he has 2 different organizations, right? Grow the Show and then Q9.fm. Is that correct?
Yep.
And then Q9.fm, that's the side of the organization that helps with taking a lot of the day-to-day off, whereas Grow the Show is more of the higher level education, mastermind, that kind of stuff that will teach folks and keep them excited and going and building out their podcast. Do I have all that right?
Yeah, that's great.
Awesome. So, Kevin, I really appreciate you taking the time. Without further ado, I'll let you kick us off.
Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and share. And I'm a bit of a Teams newbie, so
all
if
good.
You could just tell me when you can see stuff, or if you can see stuff.
Yes, we can see it.
You can see it. Okay, cool. Sweet. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome. Very, very excited to chat today about how to stop chasing leads and instead of chasing them, attract them by launching a podcast. So I'm just going to dive right in. What we're going to cover today is, number 1, what a podcast even is, because I guarantee that all of you who see me and hear me right now have different ideas in your mind for what this is. The word has changed a lot over the years. We're going to talk about why a podcast is the crank that, in my opinion, turns the gears of an audience-driven business. I'm going to go over the 4 components of a podcast-driven business. I'm going to explain why podcasts are so hard to grow. So if you already have one, you'll know these things, and maybe you'll learn a bit why it's so hard to grow. If you haven't launched one yet, you'll be forewarned and you'll be able to avoid some of the pitfalls. We're going to talk about how podcasts turn skeptical strangers into binging buyers. We're going to talk about how to design your content system so that it only takes you about 1 to 2 hours per week when it's fully in flight. I'm going to talk about the best sales funnel to use for best results from a podcast. And I'll share a couple of examples of people who have built podcast-driven businesses as well. Once the slides are over, we can talk additional monetization as well, because I know that a bunch of people were interested in that. Happy to talk to that as well. But that said, what is the podcast-driven business? So this is what I call the super efficient content marketing system that gets you in front of really high quality prospects. It uses your knowledge and experiences, like the stories, that you've lived, to educate them, call out their pain points, and push them towards desired outcomes, while positioning you as the obvious person to work with, right? You're the most obvious, most trusted voice in your space. They hear your voice once a week being pumped into their brain through their earbuds. They hear your voice more than their own parents' voice in many cases. So it's obvious why they would want to work with you. And it makes it seamlessly easy for your dream prospects to enter your sales process. It's also going to nurture them, like I said before, that they become your easiest sales, and if you handle fulfillment, your favorite clients. What's also cool about the podcast is if you use it right, you can be omnipresent, right? You can be present on social media, YouTube, in the podcast apps, email, and search engines, just with this one input. And I'm going to talk about how that happens. And that's without you having to spend entire days of your week just creating content. I know a lot of business owners who have entire content days. I've never done a full content day, and content has been my main business driver for a long time. What I also like about this is that today's world, everyone's attention span is shrinking. It's how can we get this 1-minute video and make it 45 seconds? It's just very hard to convey value in that short amount of time. And a podcast goes against the grain. They're long, right? People sit with you for a while. You can dig into nuance. You can really dig into your personality. And like I said, it's, in my opinion, the easiest, most sustainable, and long-term method to build a business that grows organically with high profit margins, which means you can do all the stuff that you want to do as an entrepreneur, right? Remove yourself from the day-to-day, enjoy the fruits of being niche famous while becoming friends with world-class people. So podcast is how I have done everything that I've done in business ever. So my podcast, Grow the Show, has generated over 3 million in sales from content in just a couple of years. I have really, really strong funnel metrics thanks to the podcast. I get opt-ins. So I get leads every day from content that I posted sometimes years ago. They just keep coming in. It's allowed me to become an authority in my space. I've been able to interview and rub shoulders with a lot of giants in the space just because I can interview them on my podcast. It's grown my audience from a size of like 1,200 in 2020 to over 56,000 in reach. And this is actually, that screenshot's a little bit old. And I've been able to serve over 400 other podcasters who all discovered me through my podcast. Super meta. And again, I spend about an hour a week on my content, and the rest of the time goes to running my business and doing the other silly things that I like to do, like attend masterminds and DJ, right? So why does the podcast-driven business work so well, even in today's noisy content world? Like everybody's making content. There's so much competition. And I'm about to tell you that, but first let's define the word podcast, because in today's world, people use podcasts to describe different things. That was not the case when I started as a podcaster in 2018. I launched a show about my hometown of Philadelphia, and everybody knew what a podcast was. But now some people say a podcast is a piece of audio content that's usually longer than 5 minutes that they listen to on Apple or Spotify or one of the podcatchers like Overcast. There's a million apps that people use to listen to podcasts. Now, though, some people refer to podcasts as a video long form interview where there's a host and a guest, and there's usually video, and it's on YouTube, and it's an interview. What's crazy is for the past couple of years, I've heard people more and more start to say, I watched a podcast the other day. And if you would have told me in 2018 that people said, I watched a podcast, I'd be like, what was wrong with them? No more. So the question is, what is a podcast? Is it audio? Is it video? Is it an interview? Is it solo content? Is that a podcast? Well, my answer is any of that stuff. So a podcast is, in my opinion, any piece of long form content, audio or video, that is regularly published to a podcast feed or YouTube channel. And regularly published is the key. So to me, yes, if it's just solo talking head videos, but it's published every week at the same time and it's available on the podcast listening apps, to me, that is a podcast. Interviews are also podcasts, whatever, it's long form media content. That's how I define it. So for the rest of this conversation today, that is what a podcast is. It is pretty much all of the above. Whatever you think it is, it is. But just understand that everybody has different definitions. Cool. Can I get thumbs up if everyone's with me on that? Yeah, awesome. So Like I said, YouTube channel that publishes interviews every week. That's a podcast. Audio only feed. That's a podcast. A talk show with recurring co-hosts that's available on the only. These are all podcasts. So whatever you think, whatever you say a podcast is, it is the thing, in my opinion, that will convert your business into an organically grown brand powerhouse. And making your business a podcast-driven business will allow you to get the benefits of content marketing without tons and tons and tons and tons of time on social media. So this is what the podcast business looks like. I'm going to break all of this down in just a second. But in short, the podcast is the thing that feeds everything else that you do from a marketing perspective. Here's how it works. So it all starts with that regular cadenced podcast episode that solves a real problem from your target prospect. You want the problem that your podcast solves for its listenership, for the people who watch it, to be the same as whatever your business is that you're selling them. So if you're selling them some sort of service around marketing, then the podcast should be about marketing. You want to have a straight line between what you talk about on the show and what you then can sell them. But either way, you make one podcast episode a week that solves a real problem for your target prospect. Now, that can be you interviewing a guest if you want. I think guest shows are a little overdone right now because everybody's doing them and it's just kind of the default. Oh, I'm going to interview people once a week, right? You can have a co-host that you have a conversation with every single week, or you can do solo episodes with just you. These are actually working really well right now when it's just solo, spitting value by yourself. It's super, super efficient. Your podcast can be audio only, but it can be audio and video. Everybody's going to tell you that you got to be on YouTube. You got to do video. Yeah, there's benefits to being on YouTube, but you don't have to. There's tons of successful audio shows, so do what you want. But that 50 to 60 minute piece of recorded content is you, as the founder, your input into this system. That is the thing that you are responsible for making every single week. And here's why. When your prospects consume your podcast episode, they're going to be spending tons of time listening to your voice and building know, like, and trust factor with you. So podcast episodes, I think, are the most potent and powerful lead nurturing mechanism there is. Nurturing. Okay. I got to zoom in a little bit because I can't see on my teleprompter. This is going to relate to monetization where we talk about that later. But studies have shown that people who listen to podcasts trust the ever living crap out of the hosts of those podcasts. It is crazy. Those hosts tell you to buy something and you buy it. I have a pair of shoes that I bought from Tom Bilyeu's podcast. And I'm like, why did I buy these shoes? But Tom Bilyeu said, you should buy these. They're waterproof. And I'm like, okay, Tom, boop. I don't know what it is, but you listen to podcast hosts. So you want to tap into this with the audience of your podcast, right? This is why the biggest creators in the world, like Alex Hormozi and Layla Hormozi and Amy Porterfield and Jenna Kutcher and Russell Brunson and Tony Robbins and Simon Sinek and Financial Feminists and Gary Vee, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these people have podcasts. All of them do. And that is because it is such a potent lead nurturing thing. Nothing builds trust like this because people just spend so much time with you and you can go so deep. It also has long-term benefits that other mediums don't have. So social media posts and emails, right? Instagram posts, emails, LinkedIn, they disappear after a few days. You post it and it's gone. Every once in a while, a video will go viral on TikTok or Instagram and it'll kind of stick around a little bit longer, like for a month or so, but that's it. Social media ads disappear the second you stop spending money. Podcast episodes, on the other hand, keep marketing for you for years to come. This is an opt-in I got from a podcast episode that I published almost 2 years prior. And so I recorded that episode, published it in December 18th, 2023. This opt-in came in November. So, 1 year. That does not happen with social media posts or ads, I promise you. This is a video interview I did with Pat Flynn, and I get opt-ins and leads from that video, which I think, 2 years ago that I did that one? The opt-ins come in every day from that video. So that video is still marketing for me to this day. Same thing. My oldest video is from January 11th, 2022. Same thing. I get leads that come in years later all the time. Tons. So what's cool is that not only are you getting leads and sales from publishing podcast episodes, but like I said at the beginning, you also get access to business leaders who otherwise are not going to sit with you for an hour. Like when you have a podcast, you can say, hey, I'd love to have you on the show. And they're like, yeah, great. Let me move my calendar out of the way so I can sit with you for an hour. Business leaders don't do that otherwise. They're not even going to answer your emails. So that's another huge benefit that you don't get from social media, right? It's not, hey, I'm publishing on LinkedIn. You should sit with me for an hour. No, it just doesn't happen that way. So your podcast is a fast track to be able to really network with some heavy hitters, like I said. And then you can also monetize your podcast directly as well via sponsorship and affiliate revenue and YouTube monetization if you're doing YouTube, which that's the gold standard. You're putting out podcast episodes that are bringing you customers, and you're also getting paid by YouTube to do that. It's just, that's you're getting paid to market, right? So those are some of the reasons why a podcast can be a major growth lever for your business. However, here's the pitfall. Trying to use a podcast by itself is almost impossible. I learned this the hard way. And this is what a lot of business owners are doing. They just have a podcast. It's completely in a silo. It's by itself. And there are pitfalls to that. And it really doesn't work. And that's why these people, not only all these people that I mentioned before, they don't just have a podcast, right? They leverage additional channels in addition to the podcast so that they can get the most out of that time that they're spending. All those huge names that you know, they're very good at managing their time and getting the most out of their time. So they use the podcast as a major driver of their input. They record there. And then the stuff that they say on that podcast then gets turned into other content. Okay. So the question is how do we leverage all of our channels while still having time to run our business and without having, $50,000 per month content teams? Well, this is where we create what we call a content flywheel around the podcast. Okay. So it's going to start with an email newsletter. So when you have a podcast, you can take the value that you provided in your podcast episode and make that an email newsletter. And the reason why you want to have email is because an email list is the number one place to get people to actually take action and buy and make a purchase. It's actually very hard when someone's listening to a podcast episode to get them to buy the shoes. When I listened to Tom Bilyeu's show, I think I heard the shoe ad like 8 times before I actually did it. And even then I did it months later. But email gets people to take action right away. And so, like I said, podcast episodes are the best at building trust, but they're not great at getting people to take action. And if you think about it, if you listen to podcasts, you're probably doing something else while you're listening to podcasts, right? You're driving, you're working out, whatever it might be. You're busy. The odds that you're going to put the barbell down, get out of the squat rack and buy shoes is low, but you are likely to buy stuff and book calls when you're checking your email, right? And there's tons of studies that show that email just drives action. It drives sales like nothing else. And so that's why we want to tie in your email list with your podcast. I'm going to skip all this proof. Hopefully you just believe me. If you want, you can go back and check the recording. But integrating your podcast with your email list creates this 1-2 punch where they listen to you on the show, they get to know you, and then they get your emails and you get them to take action there. Okay. Now, there's still a missing piece though, because a podcast is difficult to grow and an email newsletter is difficult to grow because neither of those things have algorithms. YouTube is the exception. We don't have to get into the nitty-gritty there, but for the most part, your audio podcasts and your emails don't have an algorithm that's just bringing you leads all the time. So that is why we need to plug in social media as well, because social media is what has algorithms. Tons of proof, but I know social media is hard. And this is the biggest complaint I hear when I talk about this with business owners. I tried social media. It's not working. I have this agency. I'm not a social media person. I don't want to spend all my time making social media posts. Yeah, neither do I. That's why the podcast driven business system is so great, because when you record a 1-hour-long podcast episode, this is the key. This is the writer downer. When you record an hour-long podcast episode, you sat there for an hour and you shared a bunch of useful little nuggets, little ideas. When you have this system built, you're able to pull those ideas out of that conversation that you have. So what you want to do is say, okay, and you use AI to do this. You give AI your conversation and AI says, here's the 10 to 20 things that you said in this episode that'll be great social media posts. It's not repurposing clips. So anybody who here has a podcast and thinks, oh, I'll just rip clips, it doesn't really work well. It doesn't grow your audience. But what does work is using a strategic combination of automation, AI, and a little dash of your own creative input. We call it the finishing touch, to create social media posts based on the stuff that you said while you were yapping on your podcast, right? And the best part about this is you can use this to show up on whichever social media platform you want: TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever makes the most sense. So you don't have to dance on TikTok, but you can if you want. You can make text posts on LinkedIn. You can do image posts. You can do carousels. You can do short form videos, whatever it is. But the time consuming part of social media is ideating content and writing the copy of the content. What am I going to say? Well, that's already done for you when you just did it on your podcast episode. Okay. So now you input 1 hour of your time, you record a podcast episode through a combination of AI, automation, and your team, if you have one. You then get an email newsletter out of it. You get social media posts out of it. And now you are showing up everywhere. And the last piece to hook up is revenue, monetization. How do I actually make money doing this? And that's where your sales funnel comes into play. So I'm assuming all of you have a process for how you sell, right? And so what you want to do is make it so that your sales funnel hooks up to these 3 different pieces. I call it the value first sales funnel. So when people are listening to your podcast episode, you just add a little call to action in the middle of the episode that says, hey, if you want this ultimate guide, or if you want this masterclass, or some little freebie, right? A lead magnet. All you got to do is go to this URL. Same thing on social media. You send people to a lead magnet. If they're on your email list, they've already gotten the lead magnet. And in all 3 of those cases, you send people into your sales funnel from those 3 areas. Okay. Your email newsletter, sending people into the funnel. Podcast, sending people into the funnel. Social media, sending people into the funnel. And what's key is that these areas are also sending people to the other ones. So on your podcast, you get people to join your email list. And on social media, you get people to listen to your podcast. So you have all these things pointing at each other and constantly bringing people further into your content ecosystem. All the meanwhile, your input is just that 1 episode per week. Okay. So I think I kind of lost. There we go. So the way that you actually connect these pieces is what I call rotational CTAs, rotational calls to action. That's just like I said before, every episode you make 1 call to action to somewhere else within your ecosystem. And likewise, on your email newsletters, you make a call to action somewhere within your ecosystem so that all these things are driving people into the other ones and they're each doing their job. The podcast episode is nurturing people. Social media is reminding them that you exist. Email is getting them to take action, and the sales funnel is getting them to buy. Okay. So with this system in place, your podcast is a lead gen and lead nurturing machine. It's working around the clock. It's converting strangers to fans, to clients, to customers. And the best part is that it just, like I said, takes you an hour per week. I'm gonna skip ahead just a little bit here where I'm just like, do this. Just a couple of examples of people who have done this. Anna is somebody who launched a podcast or she came to me and she was at 1,300 downloads per episode. After she hooked up social media and email to this, she grew her audience to 25,000 downloads a month and landed a major book deal. Brian Lubin is somebody who similarly launched the show, got the podcast-driven business system going, has since grown a 7-figure mastermind around his podcast. It's called the Action Academy. Nicole Holloman is somebody who launched a entertainment show that's about a certain book series and got 1 million downloads in just 90 days. For the same reason, she hooked up social media with email and the input was her podcast. And there's a few other examples as well. But that's how the system works. So I made this really, really, really quick because I just wanted to explain, okay, here's how a podcast can fit into your business. Here's how it works. I took out a bunch of stuff, a bunch of slides from this and figured I would just open it up to questions here. Or Mike, I don't know if we want to like talk more specifically to the types of businesses that the people have here in the group. Also, that's my email. If you have any questions for me, feel free to reach out. But yeah, that's what I have slides wise. So I'll open it up. Well, who has questions? Does this make sense? How can I shed further light?
Yeah, I'll let anybody in the community, anybody have any specific questions they want to dive first?
Podcast feels to me like it feels overwhelming to me because I've been suggested by a coach that I should get into it. But basically what I was just seeing from a lot of your slides, I basically have done a podcast for like years. I just kind of abandoned it. I used to do Facebook Lives. Would you basically consider those like the same sort of thing, except the podcast is probably going to float around and stay longer because there's like more of a library than Facebook Lives.
So yeah, what did you do on the lives?
Well, it kept pivoting based on what I was shifting with teaching, but I was teaching, social media practices, attraction marketing, and then I pivoted to becoming a coach. and teaching network marketers how to like market themselves online. And then when I launched my agency, it was teaching people how to, whether it was launching their own ads and why when you might need help, or why you might want to go to an agency and how you can trust an agency, and all those kinds of, just rotate topics all the time. So
Yeah, that's a podcast. So yeah,
okay,
it's just a matter of like what I wouldn't do is I wouldn't resume doing lives and take the audio from the lives and put that on the feed. But it's
yeah,
just the only difference is you're just adjusting to make the content for the purpose of people watching it later. That's it.
okay,
So yeah, I've got news. You've been podcasting for years, and it's actually
awesome.
probably not going to be as overwhelming as you think because you've already done it.
Exactly. That's helpful.
Awesome.
Do you think that there is, I know you said that both can be successful, whether it's audio or audio and video. Do you see studies that, one is better than the other, or?
So I don't know about studies, but I can say that I've worked directly with about I think I'm coming up on 475 podcasts over 5 years. I think I'm a little above 460. Um, and what I can tell you is that video it adds much more, right?
To know, like, and
How does it
trust.
look?
Yeah.
Yeah, how does it look? Like it adds extra stuff. So it's more work to do video, but video has more built-in growth. So an audio podcast has no algorithm. People listen to podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and like 100 other apps. And you upload your audio podcast to what's called a host platform. It's kind of like how websites have like a host company. And like when you're on the website, you don't know who the hosting company is, but
Right.
somebody has it.
In the
That's
background.
how podcasting works, right? So there is no algorithm. It's not like all the other mediums where one big tech company just owns the whole experience and has this AI algorithm that's just like feeding people content that they might be interested in. It's not how Spotify is trying to make that happen within Spotify, and I'm hopeful that they'll crack it. But other than that, it really doesn't exist. So I say to audio only podcasters, you have to be your own algorithm. You have to go out and market your show. You have to market your marketing. Go find people who might be interested in it and convince them to listen. So it's hard to grow. It like the benefits of audio is that your listeners week after week are more likely to be repeat listeners, where it's the same people listening week after week. So like when I talk to any coach or creator or business owner who has a show, they will say like a lot of the people who buy my stuff have listened to my audio podcast. And that's just because they're just so heavily nurtured, but it's harder to grow. So my advice is if you can do video and you're interested in it, like you're like, oh, I think that would be fun, do it, because the YouTube algorithm is so powerful. YouTube has monetization baked in. So if you're gonna learn this new medium, you might as well skip right to doing video. Make your feed available on the audio platforms, but I would be more concerned week after week with, did this video get views? Did this video get views? And if you make that happen, get more and more views, your audio show will actually also grow. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, it's why I really stopped doing the lives, just because I wasn't getting the audience, I wasn't getting traction, it wasn't growing. So I just got exhausted by, making sure that my room was set up and the lighting was good and I looked, presentable. And so I was just like, okay, I'm exhausted by this. So
Right. But the exhausting part of it, I would propose, is that it wasn't growing. And that's because,
yeah,
when people go on Facebook, they're not, it's not like, here's a live from someone you've never heard of.
right.
Right. So like,
Asking to be taught. Yeah.
right. And like, so people just didn't even know that you were doing the lives who didn't already know who you were. YouTube, on the other hand, you log in and here's a video that you might be interested in from somebody you've never heard of. And if the title and the thumbnail is good, you're gonna be like, oh, click, and then boom, you're on the other side of the fence now, someone discovers you. So a lot of audio podcasters quit. There's a famous stat that the vast majority of podcasts don't make it past, I've heard people say 3 episodes, 8 episodes. That is true. And a huge reason is because people burn out because there's no growth. So they're like, what am I doing spending all this time? But what they don't realize is they have to make the growth happen. Right.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Good luck with the new version of the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Anybody
Any
else?
other questions?
How, you've been doing this for a long time. So not only can the podcast be a source of building trust in front of folks, right? But having the guests and the right guests.
Yeah.
What do you teach about that as, its own lead gen source? I've always kind of thought of it as the Trojan horse of like, hey, here's this gift, you're coming onto my podcast. And then you end up building an amazing relationship because they sat down with you for an hour, that person, right? How big of part of the process is that, or how big of the win is that for a lot of the folks that you teach and work with?
Yeah. So do you mean like how important is the networking with the guest? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Like in terms of the win for a lot of folks that are running a podcast, there's building value for the folks that are listening. And then there's, using it as a networking tool.
Right.
Yeah. What are some of your tips around that? And
yeah. So great question. And it brings up what I have learned is the more you optimize your show to be 100% in service of the listener, it is just for them. And you don't optimize the show to grow your network as quickly as possible or to be as fast and as easy as, despite me saying it'll only take an hour a week. It eventually gets to that point, but at first it doesn't take more. It takes more than an hour a week. But I see a lot of podcasters out of the gate. They're like, all right, I'm launching a podcast because I want to have a great network. And I don't want this to take me a lot of time. I want to completely optimize for the least amount of time possible from the very start. When that happens, the show sucks. And so nobody listens to it. Ironically, though, if you say my goal is to make a good show and my every decision I make is in the service of a specific listener. Here's who my listener is, and here's how I want the show to serve them. This is what I want the show to do for them. Not what I'm going to do on the show. What is it like? So, for example, my podcast, Grow the Show. What I don't say is on my podcast, I interview successful podcasters and I share what I've learned helping podcasts. That's not how I talk about the show. I say Grow the Show is the podcast that grows your podcast. Same show, but you feel how you're like, oh, I want to listen to that second one because I want my podcast to grow.
Right.
Ironically, when you think listener first, you will build a network beyond your wildest dreams. And that is because when your show is good, because you thought about the listener first and you optimize it to make it a good show, it grows faster. And as your audience grows, the incredible people see how big your audience is. And they're like, well, I want to be on that show. I want to meet with that person. So that's the key is like, yes, if you make a good show. I remember when I launched my Philly show, I didn't get too deep into my story today, but basically when I launched my podcast originally, I was a software developer at a big health insurance company. I was not passionate about software or health insurance, but I am passionate about my hometown of Philadelphia. So I launched a podcast back in 2018. We didn't even use the term full-time creator back then. And everyone in my life literally said, what's a podcast? But I launched a show interviewing successful Philadelphians. And within 8 months, I would go into a restaurant and like an app would come out, compliments of the chef. It was crazy. And I'm like, what is this? Like, this is wild. Because that's not why I did it. I was just like, I just really want to make this show. I love Philly. I want to hear from successful Philadelphians. Nobody was doing this. So let me make a show that really showcases the successful people here. And then they all wanted to be on the show because they wanted to be showcased. So I was like, I was like getting tickets to Eagles games. Like, I was like, this is crazy. So, but if I would have been like, I want to launch a podcast so that I could be in the in-crowd in Philly, the show probably would have sucked and I wouldn't even be talking to you today.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
I have another question in line with Mike's point. Because I am working with a coach who basically is wanting me to start a podcast, basically to get interviews, to be able to pick somebody's, business apart, to find out what are their struggles, what are their, pains, so that I can come in and help them and offer support. So kind of two questions. Do you think that is still a good approach? Because that's obviously why it sounds like you say that, the interviews are failing because so many people are doing them. But is there a way to flip it so you can make it to the listener, but yet still be able to use it as a lead source with client, for potential clients?
Absolutely. So yes. And what you're touching on here is that there's like two pervasive strategies in the like online business world right now for podcasting. And one is create a podcast to get your listeners to buy. And another is create a podcast to get your guests to buy your stuff. And they're two different strategies. The shows on the right, like I know of a lot of business owners who they have like a machine of podcast interviewers, and they interview people and they close 20 to 30% of them. That it's harder to grow that audience, and those shows tend to not have much of an audience, but the business owners tend to not give a heck because they're closing deals, and they didn't launch the podcast to build an audience. They launched it to have conversations and close deals. Totally valid. And that's a valid strategy. I play a little bit more in the world of, I want to launch a podcast so that my potential clients and customers listen to it and then want to buy from me. I can tell you that I know of specific examples of huge major shows that are in the top charts who do both. So it is possible to do both. There's one in particular, the woman is an influencer, mentor of mine. She interviews like celebrities. And so her like celebrities and popular authors and stuff like that. And so her show is just like, it's a little bit general success show. And she's very, very good at growing a podcast. So it's often in the top of the chart. She gets huge names. And so she sells ads on the show. She's got a huge audience of people. That audience doesn't buy her stuff, but her guests hires her production agency. So she closes the guests on, hey, we can make a podcast for you like this, but the podcast that she makes is for a different audience. So you see how like it doesn't necessarily have to be an exact one-to-one. It can be done.
Okay, awesome. And then another question I had was, do you put together like an outline for when you're like putting together a show, or like you said once per week, do you have like a month worth of like, here's topic ideas that rotate and kind of tie in together, or is everything just random?
Yeah, so a little bit of both. So a couple things to note. Number one is, when you might have this ahead of time, but after you've been publishing the show for a while, you'll usually notice that there's like 3 or 4 content pillars, like 3 or 4 buckets that your content kind of fits into. So for me personally, I have 4. Bucket number 1 is monetization. How do I monetize a podcast? Bucket number 2 is growth. How do I grow the audience? Bucket number 3 is retention. How do I make good podcast episodes that keep people listening? Which, spoiler alert, every podcast thinks they have a growth problem, but most of them have a retention problem. And then 4 is premise, which is all the other one that nobody thinks about, but is a bigger problem. What is the name of my show? What is the promise that my show is making? What is my show here to do for people? So almost all of my episodes fit into one of those 4 buckets. And so I try to make it so that I'll go over a month, I hit each of those 4, but it doesn't always work out that way. But it's just like a general guideline. Now, that said, on a week-to-week basis, when it comes to content topics, my favorite way to do it, and the way that, like, in my opinion, generates the most sales and like does the best job of nurturing, is using what I call the PQRS method. And so what that looks like is, at the end of each week, you review your calendar. Everything, not just business meetings. It's meetings, it's interactions with clients, it's stuff you did with your family, like whatever it was. And for each item on the calendar, you ask PQRS, what problems did I solve? What questions did I answer? What realizations did I have? And what stories did I encounter? And oftentimes, if you just do that for like one busy day at work, you get like 8 potential content topics. Now, when you do it that way and you use just your life as the generator of content ideas, you get a couple benefits. Number one, your stuff is very authentic, which I used to cringe when people said authentic because it was such a buzzword. But in the world of AI, in my opinion, as things develop, success online with content is going to be more about your experiences and your relationships, because knowledge has just become a commodity, because you can ChatGPT anything. And like ChatGPT can like write you, here's the 3 ways to blah, blah, blah. So people are just going to tune it out because everybody's saying it. But what is unique is the stuff that you did, the people that you know, the stories that you encountered, right? So when you use the PQRS method, you see, oh, wow, I had a one-on-one call with a client last week, and she asked this incredible question, and we dove into this thing, and my gosh, my audience absolutely needs to know the answer to that question. Yeah. And you make an episode about that. That's when those prospects who are just like the client are going to be like, whoa, I was struggling with that too. That's amazing. So I recommend you use that.
That's the premise to attraction marketing, is the stories, the authenticity from that. Yeah.
Bottom up. Exactly. Rather than top down, which is like, what should my topics be? It's like, what are people asking you about? What are you helping people with? inject a couple stories, and that's when people are like, wow, I really love following this person.
Because they connect because you feel like you're in their brain. Yeah.
They're like, is she listening to my calls? Like, what?
Right.
This is crazy.
Yeah. How did she know that, or how'd they know that?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Awesome. Thank you.
My pleasure. Great questions. It's clear that you are thinking about this. So I'm excited to
Yeah.
hear about what comes from it.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Cool. My pleasure. Mike, I'd love to talk a little bit for a moment about monetization. Are there any other questions, or can I riff for a second?
Go for it.
All right. So yeah, we promised some monetization talk in addition to, getting people to, buy your stuff. So first of all, number one way to monetize a podcast, if you have a business, is by getting people to buy from your business. You're gonna have a hard time making more money from sponsors than selling your product or services, whatever that may be. So that's like kind of the prerequisite to this. But monetization is such a buzzword, and I am asked by every podcaster I encounter, how do I monetize my podcast? And so here's the distinction that I want to share and that I want everyone to take away. Monetizing your audience is a very, very difficult thing to imagine, because when someone says, how do I monetize my podcast? I usually say, at what moment is your podcast monetized? When did it go from not being monetized to being monetized? And they usually think, and they're like, I'm not really sure. When I make money, and I'm like, okay, good start. Who's paying you? And they kind of think, and most people say, well, my sponsors. And I'm like, okay, cool. Who's paying them? And they kind of look up and they're like, I guess my audience. And I'm like, yes. So if you monetize your show or your audience via a sponsor, you're still monetizing your audience. You're getting them to buy something. Your sponsor is just a company that's paying you in advance for your audience to buy their stuff. So when you're asking yourself the question of how can I monetize this podcast, a better question to ask yourself that will yield better answers is, what could I recommend my audience buy that they're probably going to buy anyway? Or maybe they're not going to buy it anyway, but what can I make them aware of? How can I influence their purchase decisions in a way that benefits them, but also I get a cut of? So the baseline is sell your stuff to your audience first, because that's probably going to get you the biggest cut. And then after that, if you want to monetize it further, you can partner with other companies to sell them other stuff that you get a cut of. But like I said, that age-old question of how do I monetize this? People wring their arms. It's just, what can you get your audience to buy that you can get a cut of? That's it. So I'm happy to talk more about like how to get sponsors and all that stuff. But for folks that are new to podcasting, that's usually the sort of belief that I want to talk about first, which is just, you don't have to go find sponsors. It's just these people in front of you. They're going to want to buy something. Make a recommendation.
Michael, Ian, you guys got any questions? Just want to make sure you guys have a chance.
Good, thanks. I've been sitting here listening, and it's been really interesting. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
It's not something I've got round to doing at the moment, but in the future, start looking into doing that. Thanks.
Yeah, don't do it unless you're ready. It is, it's a thing.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, you talk about, asking people if like how you monetize it. Like I have a Facebook group too. And all I have to do is create an offer. And if I put out an offer, then people purchase. But that's still, yeah, you have to have an offer.
Right.
So,
Somebody's got to sell them something. So it's, do you want to make the thing and sell it to them, or in some cases you don't make the thing, but you sell it to them. But yeah, that's it.
that's been a stumbling block for me, because then the whole imposter syndrome and all that kind of stuff kind of pile up. So, but
My
yeah,
favorite
that's
thing-
where the live started. Yeah, was from building my group.
And that probably happened around 2020-ish.
19, yeah, October of 19.
Yep, exactly. Facebook I think it was 2019, I ran a Super Bowl ad, maybe it was 2020, for Facebook groups. So at that moment in time, Facebook's priority was groups. So they were pushing groups, go into groups. When you logged into Facebook, all your notifications were in groups.
Yeah, it was before that was business
then-
pages, and then it went to groups. Mm-hmm.
You got it. There was a point that I wanted to make, but it escaped me.
A Super Bowl ad.
No, before that.
Oh,
Talking about sponsors, monetization. Oh, yeah. So I was just talking with a client of mine earlier today, and he launched his show in October, I think September, October, and it's specifically for those who do boutique hotel investing. It's called the Hotel Investors Playbook. The guys are really sharp. The show is doing very, very well. You know, one of the best show launches I've had in a while. It's awesome. And he said to me, he's like, he's an investor, and he launched the show because he wants to interview other investors, but he also, you know, wants to build his brand and maybe someday have like a mastermind or something like that. But he told me today that he's been getting tons of emails from the listeners of his podcast who have said, do you have a mastermind? Do you have a mastermind? Do you have a mastermind? And he's like, I really wasn't thinking about launching a mastermind. But I was like, Michael, you have discovered the number one way to monetize a podcast, which is make the show really good, keep making it and putting it out there. And when the time comes to monetize your show, your audience will ask you to monetize them. They will say, do you offer coaching? Do you have a mastermind? Do you have any courses? Yes. Right? What do you recommend for this software? Sponsor, affiliate. What camera do you use? Affiliate link, right? So it's just the questions that you ask. Do you do this? Do you do that? Easy monetization.
Exactly. Awesome. Good deal.
All right. Kevin, thank you so much for investing the time. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you, friends.
Have a great one.